in this really fast-paced world, we need people that understand, master, and own what they do. We don't need competent and compliant people.
Hi, Christie.
Hi, Jeff.
We're recording now.
The many hours of conversation you and I have had, we've had probably half of them that haven't been recorded.
You know what we should do? We should start a podcast.
You think? Let's call it The Why and the Buy.
All right. And welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the Why and the Buy podcast. I am here, as usual, with my partner in crime, Christie Walters. How are you today, Christie?
I am fabulous. How are you doing?
Oh, couldn't be better. It's a Tuesday afternoon in the D. Sun's out. Had a little rain this morning. It's all good.
Nice. Going to hit some balls this afternoon?
Nope. I got way too much important work to do, Christie.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm changing the world. I'm changing
the world. Of course you are.
I got no time to hit golf balls. I wish I had more time to hit golf balls. I got to tell you, because I am struggling. But we're not here to talk about my golf game. We're here to talk with Mr. John Brantley. John, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good.
Yes, excellent. So I want to just kind of introduce John a little bit. John and I had I had the pleasure of getting to know John very briefly at a couple of National Speakers Association meetings here in Georgia. And John's actually a past president of NSA. And every time I talked to him, I was like, I want to go back. I want more. Like, I need to have more of that discussion. And it was always this, he just oozes servitude, servant leader, right? I mean, I just can feel that in everything that he talks about. And the more I got to know his background, I understood why. So I'm going to tell you very quickly about John, but I'm going to let him really dive into what his passion is and what he does with regard to making better leaders in this world. So today he is president of Oxen 360, which is a training and consulting services company, and they focus on building that next generation of leaders and helping people understand how to operate in this new complex and sometimes weird world we're in, right? And in addition to that, he is also co-founder of BAM Adventures. And I'm not going to even give you any information about BAM Adventures because I'm going to let John do that. So John, tell our listeners a little bit about your two companies and the passions that surround those.
So Oxen 360 is a training and consulting company, and we've been building leadership systems, team systems, coaching systems for about 25 years. And what really drives us at this particular moment is a few years ago, we began to realize that what we actually did was we stepped back and looked at the leadership models that we are using right now, same ones that I have been designing over the years. And realize that we're using leadership models that are sometimes 30 years old or older in terms of the core essence of that model. And that it started seeming kind of weird to me with the world changing incredibly like it is changing today. And with expectations changing in the workplace like expectations are changing in the workplace, it just seemed out of alignment. And so what we began to do is we began to say, okay, what's out of alignment with this model? And out of that came what really is the burning passion for what we will do the rest of our lives. And that is, how do we build a new generation of individuals, of teams, of leaders and organizations that can thrive in this extraordinary and complex world? So what we began to think is, rather than tweak the old models, we need to make sure we have a model for leadership that actually fits in the context where we are. So if that makes sense, kind of about where we are right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because the new models, or at least the old models, were all built on managing and controlling. And everyone that I've ever talked to in the workplace does not particularly want to be managed and controlled.
Leave me alone. Let me do my job. Right. Absolutely. So tell me about this misalignment. So what does that mean when you look at organizations and you go, oh, you really need my services? What are you seeing?
So it starts with what the context is in terms of where we live and the implications of that. So if the world is changing at incredible speed, if the complexity of the world gets more every day, if the diversity of the world, the decentralization of the world, if all of that is continuing to move at a really rapid pace, the idea of trying to manage and control people is exhausting as leaders. I mean, how many sales leaders do we know that are listening to this podcast that just are worn out? And oftentimes they have more people than they can get their hands around to manage and control. And we began to ask a more of a fundamental question rather than a technique question. And the fundamental question was, what's wrong with that? And for us, the answer began to be, in this really fast-paced world, we need people that understand, master, and own what they do. We don't need competent and compliant people. And most of our leadership models, that's exactly what it builds. And part of this actually segues to our other company. We have a company that does family events for military families around the world. And we work with very frequently deployed families most of the time, where the service members very frequently deployed, very highly skilled, very highly disciplined individuals. And we began to do some of the learning about, okay, how do people train to be in those highly skilled, highly disciplined, very elite roles? And we began to see a different learning model. And we began to see a different kind of relationship that exists within those groups. And our thinking moved fairly quickly to say, wait a minute, we don't need compliant people anymore. What we need is to know how to build those types of individuals that understand, master, and own what they do so that they are managing and controlling, not me, the leader. And that has to do with that whole concept of what we call locus of control. And where do you want the locus of control? Do you want it inside that person, or do you want to have it in you? And I don't know about you, but if I've got 20 or 30 salespeople reporting to me, I don't want to be the locus of control, that center of control. I want them to be driving that.
You can't control that. And that's the thing. When you've got 20 or 30 salespeople, now you're doing so much time, you're spending so much time managing that you're not spending any time leading. You're spending all this time behind a computer, behind a desk, on a phone, looking at spreadsheets and reports, just trying to figure out and compile what everybody can do or what everybody is doing. It's the definition of middle management, right? All you're doing is filtering the activities so you can pass it on to someone above you, which is why I never wanted a promotion from the field. I looked at what those guys were doing and I was like, yeah, more power to you. That's fine. No, thank you. But what's really interesting, though, is that, you're suggesting that we can build leaders. And I'm not leaders are born, not made. I mean, leaders are certainly made. But, I mean, it seems like you are codifying what it is that goes into a great leader, putting those attributes, naming those attributes, essentially, and then specifically training each one of those attributes. That sounds a lot like parenting, but that's another podcast altogether. What have you learned in the process of that, and how trainable are these attributes?
Well, the first thing I've learned is that most people are adapters. Most people are not self-starters, and that includes leaders too. And that's the major flaw that I see most of the time with leaders, is they make the assumption that people are self-driven. And so all they need is information. And we just don't believe that. What we believe is that most people have greater capacity, capability, and drive than they currently exhibit in the workplace, leaders and others. So if that is the case, anybody that is an adapter, they take their cues for what they're going to do from the world around them. So they take their cues for what they should be doing from what their leader says. Do this, do this, do this. And so they get preoccupied with tasks all day long. And so the very first thing that has to happen in terms of the real teaching of those skill sets, because they can be taught, by the way, is that there has to be great clarity of what it looks like. What does it mean to actually master something? Because I will tell you, the funniest thing, and you've seen this, Christie, you've seen this, is you sit down for evaluation time with someone, and instead of simply working with them all year long for them to assess their own performance. It's about the leader coming in to assess their performance. The leader comes in and says, well, you're a 3, and the person is so ticked off because they thought they were a 5, kind of the top of the scale. Well, this is not rocket science. Somebody did not say, let's talk about what success looks like. And if you want to thrive, that's awesome. Let's talk about what you have to do in order to get to that place. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's it's an interesting concept because I'm not sure that everyone we've had on the podcast to talk about leadership has put it in those terms, that people are primarily adapters versus self-starters. And it's almost like the multitasker label that we loved in the 80s and 90s, right? Oh, I'm a multitasker. Well, no, you're not. Neuroscience says you can't do it, right? So, so all you're doing is frying your brain in the process. But ultimately, I want to dive into that a little bit more. I mean, what does it mean to create an environment where you can help someone who is a natural adapter thrive?
Well, and let me add to that just really quickly, John, if you'll excuse me, is the idea too that people want to be led. And I don't know if I'm straying off topic, or when you say that people are adapters rather than self-starters, I think all management would just prefer that they had a bunch of leaders, natural leaders to manage and to keep track of, rather than trying to micromanage a bunch of people who are really begging to be led. Okay, so by adapter, I think, okay, give me a framework to work within and I will make that my own, versus here you go, kiddo, go get them. Here's your sample bag. Go make some money. I mean, that is not. There's got to be a framework within which we can work. And am I way off base with that, or is that just a different way of saying what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely, exact same thing. Because what we observe with most leaders is they do that. They give them the sales kit. they give them a list of 533 folks that have somehow, somewhere shown some interest in potentially in this product. They go get them, Tiger, and they think that they already come equipped for that to happen, and that they have the feeling of personal power to make that happen. Well, the reality is they don't. The vast majority of folks. And so the question really is, how do we create that structure to make that happen and to make it happen very successfully and effectively? And so it begins really by understanding that it's beliefs that drive behavior. And so what we refer to it as the BAR formula. Beliefs drive actions, actions create results. So, and I guess the other piece connected to that is what we call the ROA principle, which says the results you get are directly or indirectly related to the rhythm of action you create. What you do, how you do it, when you do it, who you do it with. See, most leaders think that people know the right rhythm of action. And that is a deadly flaw on the thought process of the leaders. Most people, they may know part of it. I guess one of the ways I describe it too, Jeff, is that people come to us partially assembled.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And that's not a bad statement about the person. Right. It's a statement of reality. Right. And one of the things, so after, look, I'm 64 now, and after 25 plus years of building systems and leading people and coaching, executive coaching, after bouts of life falling apart and putting it back together and all that kind of stuff, what I've come to realize is as leaders, if we start with the assumption that people are partially assembled, it helps us build the mindset to finish the building process. And that's what we need to be doing is let's take, and also the other thing I'll tell you is that's what folks in the workplace today want. I mean, I've worked with millennials a lot, and they want to bring what they have to the workplace. They have been taught to teamwork, to collaborate.
Yes.
And they want to be able to work with others to do that. Our job is not to try to tap that down. Our job is to take it and help them develop it and taking it up to a whole different level.
And I think to that end, millennials are more in tune to asking the questions why and why not in order to gain a deeper understanding of what's going on so that they can be self-actuated, but they're not because no one has pointed them in the right direction or given them the framework within which they can do that. They want to make sure that their efforts are not wasted. They're not just going to show up, be compliant, and be competent. They know that they shouldn't be. But at the same time, well, unless I believe in why I'm doing it, unless I believe in what I'm doing, and unless you give me that framework to allow me to understand and develop my own mastery, no, I'm not going to do anything. But because the generational gap is what it is, and people don't necessarily understand that, they say, well, why aren't these people just getting to work? I did when I was that age, and now it's as if we forget that our parents were just as frustrated with we are as we are with our own kids, and it's like...
It is a never-ending cycle. There's no question about it. And we're too quick to blame millennials rather than help build a framework that works with the value system that they have created.
What happened to
and
empathy?
I think, yeah. What is that word?
It's so funny, Christie and Jeff, because the issue is not the millennials. The issue is not the millennials. The issue is the belief systems of the leader. In that case, Jeff, particularly around the word why. Because if the leader believes that the word why is a challenge, and they are rooted in that authoritarian model, then they're going to push back on that word. But if they believe that that word why is a pathway to greater engagement and greater equipping and greater empowering of that person, they're going to treat that word in a very, very different way.
Yeah. So tell me, John, what makes a company come to Oxen 360? So what's the catalyst for them picking up the phone and calling you?
It's either a proactive or a reactive. Okay, so I'm going to identify the category. It's either we know we have the capability and the capacity, but we know we are not tapping into that latent capability and capacity in our organization, and it is important enough for our future to do that. So that's one. The other one is I am so tired of taking care of blah, 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 blah. And when somebody finally says, wait, why am I doing that? Why am I doing what somebody else is supposed to be doing? And they go, I need some help.
Yeah. Wow.
It's typically, if somebody simply is looking for a tool bag of techniques that they can kind of bolt on to the side of what they're currently doing, we are probably not the best model for them. We're really very upfront with folks about that, because if all you want is technique, just go to the internet. There are more techniques than Quaker has oats on the internet.
I've never heard that one before. More techniques than Quaker has oats. That's funny. No, I say that.
Awesome.
If you want a tip or a trick, go read a book. If you want to read or you want to understand how things work, then let's have a conversation. And you cannot infer mastery from the end result. You have to understand the processes behind those methodologies, those tactics, those techniques, in order to be able to adapt to the next change that happens.
Because it's coming tomorrow.
Yes, it's coming yesterday. You just didn't know.
You weren't paying attention.
That is totally correct. And Jeff, you have a great illustration in the city of Detroit, because the city of Detroit dug down deep and said, who are we? Who are we going to be in the future? How do we find the pieces to put back together so that we become that kind of thriving city that we want to be and that draws people to us? And that's hard work, but it's essential work.
Yes, it's hard. We can attest to that. I mean, we've struggled mightily. Those struggles have been well documented, but I think what we're becoming is, in a lot of ways, a model for other cities to follow in terms of exactly what you said. All right, who are we? Who are we? We're kind, we're generous, we are outgoing, we're warm, we're Midwestern, we make stuff. All right. Maybe we don't make cars anymore. Maybe it just doesn't make any sense for us to make cars anymore, but what can we make? And then, it's funny too, as the pendulum swings, for a long time, there was nobody that wanted to get into skilled trades or any kind of the materials or manufacturing or anything. Well, now we've got a bunch of people who are willing to do that. And we've got a market who is kind of swinging back and saying, oh yeah, we still need people who make stuff. Where are all those people who make stuff? Where do they live? Well, come to Detroit. We're good. We're really good at it too. I mean, it's when you can really identify with who you are, and then when you can identify a need for what it is that you do really well. Sometimes it requires a pivot. But ultimately, we went from we make cars to we make things. And when we can understand that we make things, now, if it's not cars, then it's apps. Well, whatever comes after apps, we know from our previous experience and failures that we can make other things too.
And so it's kind of interesting because what you've actually said there is we change the identity of who we are, which always changes our rhythm of action, which always changes our outcome. And that's what sales leaders often struggle with, is helping people get clarity about who are you and who are we as an organization.
Right.
And you know how to position that in a way that makes somebody believe that you have the solution to what we are struggling with right now. Because that's why people buy. Because people are struggling with something and they're looking for a solution to that. And out of the other 543 options that are out there on the planet, what's going to make somebody choose you?
Right.
Somebody that zeroes in on that identity. Somebody zeroes in on the emotional side of what it means to change what we do or improve what we do. And then all of a sudden sales becomes so much easier. But most people in sales positions don't always understand that.
Yeah. What I love about that too, and especially this whole story about Detroit, is that in order to identify or in order to create that identity for yourself, you have to really have a strong understanding of your core values. And your core values as a city of being this creation hub really is what was the source or the wellspring that led to everything else. And then your core values don't change. Right. I mean, they stay the same no matter what the external result may be.
Mm-hmm. And so here's something interesting about that, Christie, because I think you're right. One of the things that I find is that everybody has core values now. I mean, I was around when we actually started that. You know, electrical lights and plumbing came just after I was born. It seems like, and so, but the concept is, I mean, I've been working with that for really for 30 or more years now. But it finally dawned on me one day, there's a difference between what Fred Craddock, who's just a great professor of preaching, said, between I know up here and I know in my heart. And so what we do is we take values and they become intellectualized rather than emotionalized. And what Detroit has done has emotionalized those values. That's where change occurs.
Yeah.
When you move from the head to the heart, and people begin to believe that is true, because we do what we do because of what we believe. And so you never change behavior unless you change beliefs. And somewhere along the line, in the belly of that journey, for Detroit or any other place that suddenly found a new identity for itself, we began to realize we've got to change, and we began to realize that those beliefs have to be internalized. Those values have to be internalized. I think that's a major piece. You described it, actually, Jeff, when we were talking about the city before the show.
I've got lots of nice things to say about Detroit. I just wish more other people. I wish more people would say more nice things about it too. But that's another episode for another day.
That's it. But hey, we'll give a shout out all about Detroit.
The old
That's
industry.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So, John, one of the things that we ask every guest that comes on our show, what is your why?
Well, my why, I'm going to give you the surface answer to that, and then I'm going to give you the below the surface answer to that.
Perfect.
So the surface answer is we really are committed to building a new generation that can thrive in this extraordinary and complex world. And that is a deeply, deeply, deeply emotional hook for me. And so part of that is because of my own journey, because I've had good gifts my entire life. But I spent the better part of my journey in the wilderness of fears and anxieties and wanting you to tell me that I was doing a good job. And when the world completely fell apart and I began to crawl out of the morass, I began to say, okay, you've got 20, 30 years left, good years. You're going to leave the planet someday. What do you want to do in the time you're here? And for me, it became a sense of calling. My background. So it became a sense of calling of we have to build something different if the future is going to be great for our children and for our grandchildren and for our great grandchildren. And it's not about just building a new infrastructure within the country. It's not just about building governmental systems and that kind of stuff. It's about building individuals and organizations that understand and embrace where they are with all of its complexities. And that they say, look, we're not perfect where the world is right now, but we're going to stick our feet in the ground and dig in. We're going to stick our hands in the ground and dig in and start building it and making it what we need it to be to thrive in the future. And that's kind of an audacious, I guess, task. But the reality is we have to decide why we're here on this planet. And if it's not compelling enough, then it's just all about me.
Somebody's got to have a little audacity.
Yeah.
Nothing gets done without a little bit of audacity. So, you can bring your audacity to Detroit. We'll take you, John.
Well, and see, the awesome thing about that audacity is it actually wound up freeing me to be able to do what I call speak the truth with compassion. How do we say what needs to be said? By the way, that's a part of this whole UMO model from a leadership standpoint. How do we learn how to say what we need to say, but say it in a way that says, I care about you, I care about the situation, and I care about our organization, and we've got to talk. How many times do you know folks who have seen something, but they were afraid to talk about it? And it was that thing that wound up screwing up stuff in the future. And so for me, it's about this sense of I don't want to tweak anything anymore. I don't want to try to make a better mousetrap if we don't need mousetraps anymore.
Yeah.
I want to be saying, look, we are a collection of diverse people on this, in our cities, in this earth, on this planet. And how do we figure out how to work together to make it a place that's better for all of us? Because that's when we rise up. That's when we begin to thrive in what we do. That's what you found, Jeff, that began to happen in Detroit when somebody said, wait a minute, we're a city of builders. Might not be cars anymore, but we might build apps now. We might build steelworks, might be all kinds of stuff. But we don't have to have those giant organizations anymore to make us a vibrant place. How do we build that stuff? And you got to believe that stuff. So that's kind of what my mission is. Did that answer the question?
It did. There is no right or wrong answer to that question. So you're good.
No, John, that did not answer the question. Please try again.
How about, I was really hoping somebody could find me more hair. No, if you're just listening to the audio, I don't have any hair. Yeah. I don't want any more. It's so easy. I get my hair cut once every 3 weeks with a number 3 guard. It takes my stylist about 6 minutes and 38 seconds to cut my hair and to cut all those little errant hairs that are growing where they shouldn't be growing, Lark.
And her tip is that she can double book you. That's the tip.
Yeah, there
right?
you go. Right. Yes, exactly. Nice.
From sales, Jeff, it's so funny from a sales standpoint. One time I was sitting in the chair and I said, okay, Sarah Nan, do the math for me. If you look at how much you get paid on a per minute basis, do you make more money cutting my hair, or do you make more money cutting someone's hair that takes you, 3 hours by the time you do color and all this kind of stuff? Oh, that's pretty simple.
Yeah. So what do you do for your best customers then?
Exactly.
John, how can our listeners find you or get a hold of you? What's the best way?
John at Oxen360.com is the easiest way to do that. That's my email address. We are, our website actually is down because we're completely redesigning it as we roll out this model in the next 60 days. But it will eventually be both Oxen360.com and umolearning.com. YUMOlearning.com. Yeah. By the way, I probably never actually described the brand in terms of the acronym and what they mean, although I think it's pretty clear. And that is that in the extraordinary and complex world in which we live, we need people that understand, master, and own what they do. And that's in contrast to people that are competent and compliant. That's kind of what that model is about. And so the idea that this is not about meeting goals. This is about people owning what they do, because when people own what they do and when they master their craft, they will meet the goals and they will blow beyond the goal.
Funny how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, John, one question we didn't ask you, do you have a favorite leadership book or one that you're reading right now?
Well, the last leadership book that I read was Essentialism, which I find to be a very good book if you haven't read it. I can't remember the guy's name that wrote it. He's a guy out of England that does a lot of work, and as the name would imply, this is one of the things that I liked about it, was how do you figure out what's essential and get rid of all the rest?
Yeah.
So doing this, the thing that matters. And, probably, I think most of the time we like books because they either line up with what we are thinking, or they challenge what we do to open a new path of thinking. And in the UMO learning model, in the leadership model, it's all built on the fact that if you want to help someone understand, master, and own what they do, there are only there are three categories of things that they have to master and own. And the first one is courageous realism, with our contrast to positive thinking, because I don't think positive thinking works. I think the way positive thinking is designed to reinforce what you do believe, not convince you of what you don't believe. And that's the way most people use it, is that they're trying to convince themselves that they are something, rather than saying, wait a minute, what do I really think? And why do I think that? And so courageous realism is the opposite of that. And courageous realism is the ability to see the world as it is, good, bad, and ugly, and see the possibility that is within it if we act with courage, with commitment, with compassion, and with joy on the journey. And so it's about clear lenses, not positive thinking lenses, because I find that becomes a barrier for most people to looking honestly at themselves, which is where change occurs. The second piece is we have to develop three core attributes: awareness, initiative, and discipline. And those have three subsets underneath those. We have to develop self-awareness, situational awareness, and strategic awareness. We have to, from an initiative standpoint, that it is self-driven action by nature, but awareness-based action. And we have to develop grit, that ability to get up, dust ourselves off, and go back again. And from a discipline standpoint, we have to develop, and this for leaders is really critical. If people come partially assembled, we have to help them develop self-management and then move to self-mastery and understand actions and consequences. Because what happens most of the time when we say, well, these are the consequences of your actions, it's almost always negative. The reality is all actions have consequences. Are they liberating or are they limiting?
Yeah.
Do they free us or do they hold us back? And then there are always in every position. So for your listeners, they ought to think about this, Christie and Jeff. Every role has 3 to 5 core processes that are part of this. And if the person in that role understands, masters, and owns those 3 core processes, you can 98% guarantee they're going to be successful. And so those are clearly outlined in sales. Mm-hmm. They're typically basically 5 that people work with. And so from a leadership standpoint, you need to be asking the question all the time, if you're the leader, wait a minute, let's look at those core processes. What elements of those has the person already mastered, which means that they can successfully do it in a variety of complex situations without having to consciously think about it. That is mastery. So you walk now, at least most of us, fortunately on the planet, we walk and we don't think about walking. We just walk. And that's because we have mastered it. We can do it in a variety of complex situations successfully. If there's something on the floor, we can sidestep it. We can jump over something. But the concept is we've mastered that because we've also done it the 10,000 hour mark and beyond. But most organizations don't focus on helping their people master those key components of the sales process so that they can do them without thinking about it. And then from the ownership standpoint, so that's the subset of what the UMO thing is all about, is how do we simplify processes so that people know where to focus their energy. And we help them learn how to not focus their energy in other areas and focus it on the things that really help them grow.
Yeah. I think we're going to hashtag courageous realism. I love that term.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We're gonna get that. We're gonna get that trending. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. John, thank you so much for your time. It was such a wonderful discussion, and I think there's a lot more to unpack here. So don't be surprised if I call you back.
Thanks. This was great fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I appreciate it. It's good to see you, and I guess I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Are you coming to the gala?
I will be there. Yes, it'll be nice. We'll be all dressed up.
Oh, me too. Jeff, it's
Excellent.
great to meet you. Look forward to seeing you in Detroit sometime.
Yes, we're happy to have you anytime. If you enjoyed this conversation even half as much as we did, then rate us. Give us 5 stars. Give us 4 stars. I mean, look, it costs the same amount of energy to give us 5 stars as it does to give us 4. So just go ahead and give us 5.
Yeah.
If you like us, tell us. We're at The Why and the Buy on Twitter. You can email us. Go through the website. You can find Christie. You can find me. We're everywhere, people.
We're ubiquitous.
We are ubiquitous. We're as ubiquitous as you can be. So thank you for joining us this week, everybody. We will talk to you again next week because when you know your whys,
your hows and your whats get much better.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Hey, thanks for listening to us on the Why and the Buy podcast. If you like us, tell us. Send us a message at The Why and the Buy on Twitter, or leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you got this podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Talk to you next week. How about the music on this podcast? We call them our house band. They call themselves Haskins, and they're based out of Plymouth, Michigan. If you want to hear more from them, go to haskinsmusic.com and check them out.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.